Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Bonnie Marcus. Those of you who have watched the show before or listened on iTunes know that Grace Under Pressure focuses on what's too often dismissed as the soft stuff. You know, the caring, the commitment, the compassion we feel toward one another. And when you do it as a leader, it means you mobilize people for positive action and you energize them with your belief in them and the vision. So, Bonnie, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Oh, John, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I want to tell everyone about you. You are an award-winning entrepreneur. You are a contributor to Forbes, as do I, and you are a global guru in coaching. Brava. So, and you are, today we're going to talk about your brand newest book, which is called The Politics of Promotion, How High-Achieving Women Get Ahead and Stay Ahead. A very important topic and one that's close to my heart. You didn't just get to this role, you've lived this role. And you've worked your way up the corporate ladder, and you also, now you share your lessons, not only in your writing, but you have a wonderful podcast, which has had nearly as many episodes as mine. It's called Badass Women at Any Age. Love that. Who can push back? Bonnie, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
Thank you. And my newest book is not done yet.
Well, well, it's in progress then. Good. So I love that enthusiasm. Okay. So the pandemic has not been kind to women in the workplace. Why is it especially difficult for women over 50? Which is the topic that you focus on in your new book.
Yes, it's especially difficult for women over 50 because they face not only age discrimination, research shows that they're unemployed longer, and when they finally get a job, they usually have to take a significant pay cut. So if you're between the age of 50 and 60, you're 18% less likely to get rehired. And once you hit 60 and over, you're 50% less likely to get rehired. Well, so it really has taken a toll.
Right. And especially now that so many women did lose their jobs in the pandemic, and then as it rolled forward, many for childcare, but it only exacerbates the situation for older women. Now, 50, I would hardly consider old. And being that I'm 18 years older than they are, but don't tell anybody that. But seriously.
You know, AARP says that we begin to face age discrimination in our 40s.
Women or men? So
both.
Ah, okay. Well, who knows? We're an age-obsessed society. But, you know, I'm going to say something. I'm going to throw you our first curveball. Because we've had so much time isolated, and now we're coming out of the pandemic, not there yet totally, but we've had a chance to reflect. Do you think opinions about age might shift, Bonnie? So.
I haven't seen that happen yet. Certainly in the research that I've done for this book, I found that ageism, and in particular, John, gendered ageism, which is the combination of gender bias and ageism, is really under the radar. And most people don't recognize that it's an issue, and especially companies don't see it as any kind of a DEI issue. And I liken it to where we were before the Me Too movement for women. And before that, women were experiencing sexual abuse or sexual harassment in the workplace, and they didn't have a safe environment to file a complaint or to voice their concerns. They didn't have any kind of legal backing. Mm-hmm. And so they pretty much remain silent. And I have found that the same is true for women who are experiencing age discrimination. Now, they don't want to bring attention to their age. They don't feel like there's a safe environment to do so. If they bring attention to their age, then they may be pushed out. So they are, for the most part, a lot of the women that I interviewed for the book, Not Done Yet, are silent about it and pull themselves out of the spotlight.
Right. And which only makes the problem persist, I would think.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right. So now there's something about women going for a re-entry into a job, whatever, and it's a word you use, and we all, well, is used. What does it mean when you tell a woman over 50 she's overqualified? So
that is code word for you're too old. You know, you've got too much experience. So many of the women I interviewed who are still looking for jobs get that a lot, that you're overqualified, you're too much. And I think the other aspect of that, John, is we don't want to pay you that much. Right? And it's all involved in ageism. If we bring in somebody younger, then perhaps we don't have to compensate for all that experience.
Now, does your research show, but this question came to me, but if a 50-year-old man and a 50-year-old woman, both equally qualified, went for a job, would the man be given preferential treatment? So,
absolutely. There is a lot of research that shows that the callback, even for interviews, significantly decreases when it's a female of a certain age.
Mm-hmm. Are there other than straight up bias, are there reasons for that? Quote, excuses, should we say? Are there something that somebody might say? So, an employer might say, it's like, well, if pointed out, two equal candidates, man and woman, will take the man. Would there be like, he'll be with us longer, or she's likely to retire, anything like that type of thing? So,
no, not that I know of.
Okay, an interesting thought. So what can the situation is? The odds are not, are not in favor of women over 50, but there are things they can do. Number one, buy your book, Not Done Yet. But so what's some specific tactics that you advise? So.
Well, I do have a whole section in the book that gives career advice. Yeah. But I just want to make sure that everybody understands this is career advice that I would give to anyone at any age. But as women show visible signs of aging, we are much more vulnerable to the combination of gender bias and ageism. And by the way, that happens a lot earlier for women than men because of the society's emphasis on looks and youthfulness.
It's one of my pet peeves, I think, in a way, is the the looks of women. Obviously, I of course like to look at women, of course, in a positive sense, but we men have it so easy, in the old day. If you just look at our newscasts, a newscaster or whatever could wear the same sport coat 5 days in a row and nobody notices. Our cable host, whatever, I'm noticing, I don't ever see the same outfit repeated. And the only one who does it well is Rachel Maddow, because she always wears black.
There's black. She always wears black.
I love it. It's taking a page from Johnny Cash. So. And
by the way, there's a lot of bias in media, for sure. There are a lot of female anchors who have lost their jobs in their 40s and early 50s. Because of that notion that we want to look at a younger face giving us the news and the weather. I would just be the opposite. I would rather look at somebody who looks like they've experienced life, rather than a 22-year-old just out of college. So getting to your question, there are specific things that I do recommend in the book. One is to let people know, I call it declare your ambition, but let your manager, let people know that you are still committed to doing your best work, that you want to know how you can continue to add value over the next 5-10 years. You're still invested in it because there may be an assumption that you want to slow down, right? And so I think that you need to be proactive in that way.
So let me stop you right there, Bonnie.
Yeah.
So would that mean that if you're my boss and I go to you and I say, let the boss know that my career ambitions with that company, that I'm still in the game. Is that what you're saying? So
Yes.
Good.
And if you can work out a career path, a plan for the next few years, that would be especially beneficial if you get their buy-in to what that looks like. Maybe the best way for you to continue to add value is in another department or another position, but at least you're letting them know and you're getting a commitment. You're giving a commitment and you're getting a commitment.
You know what I'd like about that, because this comes up in my coaching, not necessarily related to the age issue, but own your career in the sense of, here's what I think I could do. And I think that's exactly what you just advised. Am I correct? So
Absolutely. And I'm all about being strategic about the way you do that.
Okay.
So come up with a plan. I mean, the plan can always change, but at least you are letting the powers that be know that you are still invested in doing your best work. And like I said, you should do that at any age.
Well, the next question comes from, I know my colleague, and you probably know her too, Sally Helgeson, who writes, and she says that you talk about women give up power too easily. What does that mean, and what's the effect of that, Bonnie?
Wow, so you talk about your coaching. I address this in my coaching a lot because I think many women don't realize the many ways we give up power. And we don't understand, why we're sidelined, or whether we didn't get that promotion, or whether we're not tagged for that special project or client. And we really give our power away. One way is that we don't set boundaries and we don't know how to say no. So we say yes all the time, even though saying yes may compromise our work and our workload. We're trying to please others. And so we don't put ourselves first and stand in our personal power. And another thing is that we use compromising language very often. And this happens with men as well. So we'll marginalize, instead of being direct, and this is more subtle, John, we may say, I just want to bring up that point. We use qualifiers instead of really being direct. And then we don't appear as a strong leader. We don't, we're giving our power away. So one of the exercises I do with my coaching clients is to have them think about the ways that perhaps they may give away their power. Keep a diary of what triggers them. Is it a particular person? Is it a situation? And how does that serve them?
Right. Sally Helgeson uses the term stepping back. And that's so, in other words, it's not necessarily avoiding confrontation, although that men can be every bit as conflict averse. But it's more or less, I think, what you just said, taking a step back, or maybe what do you think, in almost an apologetic way. Am I close to that, Bonnie? So
that's certainly one way. We give up our power. We give up our power by letting others take credit for our ideas.
Yeah, that's where women act with grace, maybe without even knowing it. So they don't care about the credit. But yeah, and men will, I'll thank you for shining the light on me. That's wonderful.
Right.
So
but when somebody takes credit for your idea, I always say it's good to acknowledge it and say, John, I really appreciate the fact that you are referring to the idea that I brought up earlier.
I love it.
Right? And to reclaim it.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good, Bonnie. I like that. Yes, reclaim it. So I'm going to ask you, I have spoken with women, successful women, entrepreneurs and coaches and thought leaders about the topic of ambition. And the best advice that resonates with me, what successful women say, is own your ambition. Could we say own your age if you're a woman?
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. I think that when we see so much attention being paid to our younger colleagues in the workplace, our tendency may be to be a bit apologetic about our age. Right? And not own all the wisdom we've garnered through the years, all the experiences that we've had that really can add value not only to our own work, but to our colleagues in the workplace. So it's important to own it. It definitely is important to own it and know that your age brings value.
Right. I love the wisdom connection, because if you pay attention, you will have some wisdom. So been knocked down more than a few times, but risen up. So
what lessons have we learned in that process? And what lessons can we then pass along to some of our team members, our younger colleagues, which helps us to stay visible, and it also helps to us to stand out more as a leader.
Right. You have, I think, a way for gaining visibility, or at least influence, and you call it political savvy. Tell us about that, Bonnie.
So what I mean by political savvy is paying attention. So I think women especially believe in the meritocracy, believe that if we work hard enough and we get great results, that's going to help us advance our career, be successful. But that's only one part of the equation, John, and I know you know that. We need to pay attention to what it takes, what's going on in the workplace and those dynamics that will influence our career. And in my first book, The Politics of Promotion, I talk about specific things you need to pay attention to. What are the rules in the workplace, and the unwritten rules especially? And which unwritten rules are sacred? Who has power and influence? And that's behind the organizational chart, not necessarily looking up and say, oh, those people have all the power, because there are many people who aren't in high level positions who really do have a lot of influence. And sometimes even the CEO himself or herself can relinquish their power. So who really are the game changers, and how do things happen like that? And then what does the culture tell you? You know, especially for a woman, what is different about what it takes for a woman to be acknowledged and respected and get ahead? So those three things are really important to pay attention to. A career isn't built in a vacuum, and we need to know it takes more than our good work to get
one of the concepts that I learned from Fiona McCauley, who teaches at Georgetown, but also runs the Wild Network, Women in Leadership. And one of the things she talks about is sponsorship. And I loved her definition of it. And I think it ties into political savvy. It's when they talk about you when you're not in the room, not gossipy, but proactively. Would you agree with that, Bonnie?
I would agree. I mean, I think of sponsorship as probably the most powerful relationship you can have, because that's a high level person who can make things happen for you, open doors, advocate for you. But also what you're talking about, that definition, I also would assign to someone who's your ally or champion, someone who knows the value that you bring and can speak up for you when you're not in the room.
Okay. So what role can men play to advance women? What's your experience with that?
I think that it'd be great if men could sponsor women, especially if they are in powerful positions, that they look for women who do have potential and really clear the way for them to move forward, because very often it's difficult for a woman to do that on her own. To mentor, right? To sponsor or mentor another woman. And part of that sponsorship would be to recommend special projects for that woman where she will gain more visibility and credibility within the organization, where she will be able to build more influence on her own.
Oh, that's good. One of the techniques that you advise is you ask women to tell their story. So, and then you call it an empowering story. What does that mean, Bonnie?
Well, the first step is to really be honest, self-reflect, and write down the current story that you tell yourself about yourself. So not necessarily what you'd say to others or, put on social media, but in the darkest hours, what are you telling yourself about yourself? Because words matter and words shape your reality. And I do this a lot with my clients, and it's really an eye opener when they write their stories, because they don't realize the story they're telling themselves. And then when they look at it, I'll say, well, does that serve you, or does that sabotage your success? And very often it's the latter. So then the next step is, well, how can you reframe that? How can you then write a powerful story that will position you well for the future? Because you can change, right, the neural pathways in your brain.
Right.
You can write a new story. You can read that story out loud every day and really begin to change your mindset from one that's negative to one that's positive.
Well, it's I would have guessed that the women are always self-deferential, or deprecate themselves inadvertently, or just they're trained
More so
to do
than men, certainly.
I'm sorry?
More so than men.
Certainly.
Certainly.
Oh yeah. No problem with that one. But also, when you take a story that is maybe flat or disempowering, how do you make it more empowering? Do you ask women, hey, reflect on your achievements, or what's the technique that you advise, Bonnie?
Well, it really, John, it really depends on the story. So, and I think I gave this example in the book, not done yet, of a 38-year-old client that I had from Switzerland, whose story was that she was unattractive, that she was unhealthy, that she couldn't sleep, she was never going to get ahead, that people took advantage of her. I don't remember the whole story, but we took a look at it, and I said, okay, how much of this is true? Right?
Mm-hmm.
How much of this is really true based on a lot of it? And none of it was true. So what is the truth? Because the story you're telling yourself is damaging your well-being as well as your potential. So she would write it differently, that she wrote about her significant other, she wrote about her relationships at work, and how productive she was, and it just completely reframed that story.
Oh, the powerful thing. So now I want to turn the light on you a little bit, and I think it colors perhaps where you came from. But you suffered from Lyme disease, which many people suffer, but it can be debilitating. So what was your experience, and what was the learning from this, Bonnie?
Well, I think I've always been an overachiever, right? And
I'm surprised. You look like somebody who just kind of hides your light under a basket and is content to watch life go by.
Yeah. So I have always been an overachiever. and perhaps a bit of a workaholic in the past. Lyme disease is very debilitating. You are in a lot of pain. It's exhausting. There's cognitive dysfunction very often, and I certainly had that. I was fuzzy. I didn't, I really couldn't focus and concentrate especially on my work. I mean, some days I could barely get off the couch.
Right.
And I was fighting it like I always do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're an overachiever, you just attack it. Like, what is that barrier in my way? And the more I did that, John, the sicker I got.
All right.
And it was that realization through a healthcare practitioner, by the way, who helped me, that I couldn't fight it. I needed to really be present in the experience and take really good care of myself,
sure.
But definitely be more in the flow. Right. I started to meditate daily. Mm-hmm. I started to journal. I even bought a coloring book at the time.
Yeah.
Which was so, and that, that really was a turning point for me when I started to get healthier and get better, because I was fighting it. There's no question.
Well, no, I mean, that is a common reaction. And so do you share lessons of that with women that you coach now? Not about disease per se, but perhaps let life ease up a bit on yourself. What's the lesson for others? So
absolutely. And in the third part of my book, not done yet, I give a lot of advice about how to choose joy, how to find, what does it mean to live with the glass half full? How can you really bring more joy and happiness into your life with gratitude and the acknowledgement of all the gifts, that you have. And so very often we lose sight of that. We lose our connection with who we are, John. Either we're focused on in a lot of other areas. It could be our careers. It could be different relationships, but we lose ourselves. And the idea here is to re-find yourself and the power in who you are authentically.
Right. And would you say women perhaps are more prone to losing themselves because they're natural, in a positive sense, is naturally more focused on others, and in the process they lose themselves? And then
I mean, there's a chapter in the book called be your own best friend, right? Where I say, okay, you don't treat yourself like you do your best friend. What would you do? What would you say to yourself if you were your own best friend? And I actually give a little exercise about writing a letter to yourself as your best friend. And because we don't do that. And we have been kind of socialized to take care of everybody else first.
Exactly. So unfortunately, Bonnie, we are coming close to the end of our show, but I like to ask every guest a story about grace. And I know you have a story that you can share with us. So please.
I do have a life-changing story that I do share in the book. In 2002, I was, vibrant and healthy and doing my thing. And random people started to come up to me that I did not know. And they would say to me, what's that on the back of your arm? Have you noticed that there's something on the back of your arm? And it's a bright red birthmark. And I've always been told not to worry about it. It's a birthmark. It's like a strawberry mark, I think. But John, so many people came up to me all at once, in the grocery store, in the bank, in the gym,
Yeah.
people that I absolutely didn't know. So I said, well, maybe I ought to go to the doctor. So I went to my internist, and he looked at it. He said, that's a birthmark. That's fine. He said, I don't see anything. I look at your whole body. I think that everything's fine. But if you want a second opinion, I'll send you to somebody at Yale.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why I did, John, except there were so many people who showed up for me. And I often say, I'm not even sure whether they were people or they were my angels. But I went to the dermatologist at Yale. She looked at my arm. She said, it's fine. She said, but what's that on your leg? And I had malignant invasive melanoma.
Whoa. So it wasn't that, it was something else.
Yes, but that's my story, my life-changing story, because if I didn't listen to those, to those people, I like to call them my angels,
Okay.
I probably wouldn't be here today.
Oh, well, what a powerful story. And that what you combine is there were transitory moments that people, just said, what's that, whatever, and that forced you to, or challenged you to pursue it, and it saved your life. So what a powerful story of grace. And we know that grace comes from one another. So thank you. What a beautiful story. Bonnie, how can people find you?
Well, my website is bonniemarcusleadership.com. And of course, it has all my information about both of my books, The Politics of Promotion and Not Done Yet, which are available on all book outlets. And I have a podcast too.
Yes, you
Badass
do.
Women at Any Age. You can get information on my website, but it's on Apple and all the podcast outlets.
Great. And this show will be on Apple, iTunes too. So Bonnie, it's been a joy to speak to you today. Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure to interview you. So
thank you, John. I really enjoyed our conversation.